Hey everybody, this is I say it in the recording proper, but it's a very special episode of the Mettle podcast. We're touching on a subject that any parents, any loved ones that have young loved ones of any import are going to want to really sit down and take a listen. We talk about the intersection of technology and sexploitation. Sadly, it's a thing that's becoming more prevalent as I think there's more exposure to the technologies in question. And the biggest panacea that we get into in the episode is talking. And sadly, sometimes there's not enough. Sometimes it's the wrong type of talking. There's a whole host of places where it can go wrong. And what I love about this episode with Alyson and our guest, Jessica Weiland, is we really come at the issue from a couple of different angles, all in an effort to arm our listeners with enough ammo to at least start the convo and go from there. Please take a listen. If you like the content, if what we say resonates, please throw us a like or a subscribe. And as always, keep it cyber metal. Welcome, friends, to another, what I want to say is a very special episode of the Cyber Metal podcast. I'm joined, as always, by the inimitable Alyson Laderman, and we're both excited to have as a guest Jessica Weiland. Without further ado, I'm gonna kick it over to Alyson so we can do our propers and then get into this topic because I've been raring to go for a couple of weeks now. Alyson, take it away.
Sure. As always, though, I am a lawyer and Omar is a senior cybersecurity expert. We are not your lawyer or cybersecurity expert for purpose of this podcast. That all being said, we are here to share our experiences, our wisdom, and knowledge that we have about the topic, along with our special guest today, Jessica Weiland. And today is one of those tough conversations. It's a conversation you don't want to have, but it's certainly one that we all need to have. And it is worth exploring as adults. So any kids probably should leave the room at the moment. I guess that's a fair disclaimer. And that way your parents can decide how they want to parlay this information. Because today's topic is about sexploitation on the internet, especially now after the holidays where kids have received all sorts of toys that are wired in and connected in at different levels to the internet and to those from the outside in. This is a very important topic that we have to have as parents. And before we get this conversation really started, we all come from this from a different perspective. Omar has someone in the toddler group. Jessica's got more in that teenage group. And I have a young adult in his 20s, early 20s. And, I suspect we are all going to have shared stories and experiences of things that we have seen or witnessed or, have experienced in some way that we hope will be helpful to that larger conversation that really needs to be had by parents and those in the field. So with that, Jessica, I'm going to turn it over to you for a little introduction so people understand who you are and why this is an important topic for you.
Yeah, so thanks for the intro, everybody. I'm really happy to be here and help support this hard conversation on this topic. I am a senior account executive within the cybersecurity space, have been playing in this field for the last 9 years. But I think more importantly than that, and where this voice is coming from is, as you guys said, I am a mom of 2 boys. I am also a child that grew up in the early to late 90s. Gaming just started to kind of hit the market from a PC-based perspective. And it was really controlled back then for the most part. When you first started gaming, there wasn't a lot of social interaction. But as I got into the gaming world, that evolved and changed drastically. You had the introduction of AIM, where the scary age, sex, location conversations happened in chat rooms behind the scenes constantly, and where people were meeting each other in real life after having what they thought were conversations with a safe person that they might quickly find out was not the case. And while the days of AIM are over, I think we're seeing this evolve into other platforms. You're seeing it happen within Fortnite. You're seeing it happen within Roblox. You're seeing it happen within Minecraft, where kids can engage with whom they think might be another child their age, but we're quickly finding out that that's quite often not the case. And I think this conversation needs to be kind of show that the scary voices that we think about when we talk about cybersecurity are not necessarily always coming from the dark web. They're not this like mysterious individual hiding in a basement. They're often presented to us very simply within the games and the applications that we interact with every day.
I think that's a great place to start, right? I think you're 100% right. Games have changed. I'm going to totally date myself. I think my first gaming experience, aside from Oregon Trail, which was straight up there, but was King's Quest, right? That was my first like
Yes.
RPG
100%.
game, and going through in King's Quest 2 in particular. And I remember when Leisure Suit Larry came out and was like the racy game, but at least it didn't have that interaction with other people. You were kind of being racy or spicy in your own home. And I remember my parents having that game. That's why we were off limits, but it was there, right? But then getting into college and starting to play things like Diablo 2 and getting online and starting to see
Halo.
EverQuest. I'm going to go through a whole, Halo, all of that. Oh goodness, what was the zombie one? We would all sit there in a movie theater with it hooked up at college. We would actually hook it up on the big screen. I don't know if it was Resident Evil but one of those where it felt like you were in a movie.
Yeah, one of the Resident Evils.
But compared to what you get today, right, as you point out, the accessibility to the people playing the games is pretty much unfettered, right? You don't know who you're talking to. There's always been a bit of that, but now it seems to be so much more. And with the access on social media and games linked on social media, how as a parent do we start kind of I don't know that I say this with a big sigh. I don't know that you can get your hands around all of it, right? But where do you start as a parent, right? At what age do we really need to start looking at these toys and these interactions for our kids that you've seen, Jessica, that the audience should really be aware of?
I mean, I think it's from a very young age. I think kids need to have, unfortunately, a very savvy digital presence understanding from even the age of 5 and 6 as they start to learn how, because let's be honest, as a parent, we try and put controls in place all the time. Our kids are really darn great at circumventing them. I don't know about you, Omar, but my kids can figure out a way around most of the controls that I set up at this point. So it's no longer just a control thing.
That's the thing.
Yeah. It's got to be a conversation. It's got to be about just like how we teach them how to brush their teeth and, wash their face and brush their hair. This needs to be a daily conversation that we are teaching them from the start as they interact with these toys about what to think about, what to look for, what to do and not to do as they engage, because it has to become
I think that's an excellent point. Yeah, I think that's exactly it, that it needs to be considered cyber hygiene as we talk about it, right? You're talking about personal hygiene, that we teach our kids certain things. This needs to be one of those parenting lessons, and age appropriate, right? So speak to your kid in that age that they understand. But I think you're also 100% right that as soon as we set controls, Omar loves when I use the little air quotes there because nobody can see it. But when we put what we think are controls, right? As soon as you tell a kid no, what are they going to do? Exactly what you told them no to do, right? Yeah. Don't do this. Yeah. Then that means I'm going to push the button. I'm going to smoke the cigarette. I'm going to, go jump off the bridge because my friend said so, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so it can't just be a yes, no. It needs to be a conversation as to a why, but an age appropriate conversation. So if we were to start those conversations, as Omar is going to get to do in the next few years, right? If we are starting at about 5 to 6, which is when they're starting to go to elementary school, kindergarten, first grade, what things have you found that have worked for you and your family to start those conversations at that age appropriate level?
Yeah. So I know my 6-year-old has really started to get into the world of Minecraft. And I think one of the conversations that I've had to have with him numerous times, because he wants to know why he can't invite other people to his world. Mommy, why can't I play with this person, or why can't I play with that person? And I think it's about, I talk to him a lot about trust. Like, Aiden, when we go out to the store, do you just talk to a stranger? And he says, well, no, I know better. I know that, I don't know that person. I don't feel safe or secure unless you introduce them to me. And I think it's the same thing with that digital introduction. And we've been slowly saying, okay, because within Minecraft, there's a QR code that you can directly scan a friend's ID, and then they can only interact with that one particular ID. So that's where we're like, you can talk to your friends, people within your circle of trust, but you can't go outside that circle because you don't know what that person is, who that person is. They're not just a character in a game. That's a real life person behind it. And I think for young kids, that's important for them to understand. It's not just a character in a game. It's an actual person behind the scenes.
I think that's excellent because it's the modern version of stranger danger, right? When
Yep.
we were younger, we were all taught don't talk to the strangers.
Of course.
And I think you point out something that we I think forget as adults is in kids' mindsets, these are characters they're interacting with. They're not associating it with there's a human on the other end of that character because it's just a screen and it's just an interaction. But we know it's not just anything, that there is another human and that we don't know who that human is unless it's that friend specific QR code, assuming it hasn't been spoofed and all of those other considerations, right?
Yes.
Right. Yeah. That's a whole nother, deep
Can of
dive on that
worms.
topic.
Yeah.
But assuming it hasn't been and that it is a clean QR code and that it does directly link to that little person's friend. But that's also assuming their older siblings aren't getting on, parents, uncles, cousins, other people that have access to the device.
Yes.
You never kind of like, when I was younger, scarily enough, in the 80s, we slept over everybody's house. Like there was no thinking about it.
No,
And
exactly.
I can tell you with my son, no, we're like knowing liability the way that I do as a lawyer. I'm like, nobody is sleeping over our house and you are not sleeping over anybody else's house. Sorry. And I used to have those conversations as to why, right? And that we don't know these things. And I think a big part of those conversations is building that trust with your kids.
Yeah.
And so that they can know that they can tell you something feels not right. Right. Something
Yes.
feels weird in this interaction. Something happened at that house. Something happened in the game. Somebody said something, right? Because I think as we've all seen, all of us respectively, all the conversations start off innocently enough. Nobody's like, send me a nudie on day one, right? They build the
Right.
trust. It's, hey, let's play this game. Oh, now that I've gotten it. Oh, what did you do for Christmas? Oh, what does your school look like? How is your teacher? And then don't tell your parents, but right. That's usually that later on interaction of here's a picture, send me a pic, like some kind of
Yes.
conversation that happens. And
So
it's making sure your kids feel comfortable coming to you to say, report it.
exactly. It's funny you mentioned that too. The first time I really started talking or thinking about this topic as a whole is when I first started working at Terbium Labs. So Terbium Labs was a dark web monitoring agency for PII, but they also got into the realm of executive protection, and that led into the discussions around doxing. So I don't know if you're familiar with what doxing is, but doxing is essentially a practice where somebody interacts with somebody that's not the direct target, and then they have the SWAT team called on your house. It can cause a world of pain and hurt. It can destroy property, etc. But the conversations always started out for these individuals very harmless, like you're saying. What time is that your mom walking in the door? Is this when she normally gets home from work? Is that your father in the background? Is he normally home during these hours? What do you do? Where do you go to school? And what's your favorite subjects? What time's gym class? Like these kind of things for just gathering these small timeline details for understanding when people were or were not going to be at the home. So it usually does start out harmless and a conversation, just like building a friendship. And I think that's what makes it so hard for kids is because inherently they want to trust. And we have to be that voice of reason for them.
And how do we help them navigate that line between trust and building friendships and being aware that maybe not give so much information away? So for example, like I know with my son, he just turned 20. But as he was growing up, we had a strict look, I don't want you on social media. And here's why. And we went through the conversations. And then when he got to be a certain age, I think he was like 16 or 17, he was allowed to be on Instagram. But we're like, look, I don't want you posting though where you go to school. Try to keep away from your face. Like any info you put out, you're giving away to somebody else and you're giving your power away to somebody else and your information away. And so to help protect you in this world, you may want to consider how much information you're sharing publicly, but also privately, right? The Snapchat thing that the kids think are private. Again, I'm using little fake air quotes, but they think are private conversations. They don't realize somebody screenshotted that right now it's passed around. Oh, those photos. And so we had those conversations in middle school and really, honestly, I think as early as 5th grade, like when they start having sex ed conversations, that is absolutely the appropriate time to also bring in the why we don't send certain types of photos out. I mean, there was an incident in my son's middle school where somebody definitely got suspended because he airdropped. It was a revenge situation, little middle schooler, of a young lady's topless photos through literally the hallway. The whole school got pictures of this young, less than minority age child, topless type of situation. And yeah, that's when we had to go. And he goes, I know, we're going to have the conversation, Mom. I'm like, you're right. We are. Let's talk about it. I mean, he didn't do it. It was not him, but it was, let's talk about why this is so problematic. And so he got to see it in real time as to, oh, you weren't kidding. I'm like, yeah, it's your school, dude. Like that, and I don't think any kids are out of that zone of possibility of that happening at this point, right? I think as they're growing up, tech is in their hands from the moment they're born at this point. I mean, he at least had some time where we were like, didn't have it in his hands. But nowadays, I mean, I go out and I see babies in shopping carts with their parents' phones and they're just scrolling through YouTube. I watch them do it, video after video after video. I mean, it's just so ingrained. And so without giving them guardrails, I mean, and this is not about helicopter parenting. It's just about parenting, basic parenting. It's the same conversation, like we said, of sex ed and that type of thing. But how do you really help your kids, depending on the age, figure out where that line is between friend and potential harm?
And I think, unfortunately, we are at a point in society where, I mean, we almost have to take on one of the core conversations in cybersecurity right now is trust no one until you can verify. And I think that's something that we're just going to have to teach them, that until you can put a physical person to a presence or to an entity or to an ID, there is, and even then, unless you've met them in person, you just don't trust them. So this just becomes about, don't share details that you wouldn't share with a stranger. And that's that. It's
right.
Yeah, I think we're just at that point
Also,
where
I think just even, and depending on the age, right? We're getting to the point with technology that, sure, right? Unfortunate. Talk about consent. Don't send photos. Now you don't even need like the actual seeds of real photography to be pulling this sort of stuff on somebody that like you just want to be terrible to, right? Or you want to have that revenge activity on. So understanding, I think, is still core to the conversation at any age, is that, like you said, Jess, any details you put out there, anything with your likeness on it can then, now it can get morphed into whatever, a nefarious actor wants it to look like. Imagine in 2-3 years what you're going to be able to do. I think we're going to see it on the political spectrum, but definitely right on the personal, just understanding that whatever is out there, period, end of story, can be fashioned into just a malicious tale or something that's gonna, be aimed at hurting you. So, and it sucks because as you started the conversation, Jess, simpler times, right? Alyson, you mentioned the games were fun time, even Leisure Suit Larry. I remember, I can picture the thing there. That was, I mean, it was a closed environment, right? There wasn't anyone then that could be, like pervy with anyone, like via, communication channels. You just have to have that conversation, right? Assume and it sucks because you don't want to, put that in a kid's head, right? Assume that folks are just evil and mean on the internet until proven otherwise. But then if you don't, you're opening up to another can of corn. Like that's what I'm struggling with like knowing what the tech can do. And then how do I present, I don't want to tell my kid that, the world is evil.
No, and I think this is where we
reframe
the wording, maybe, where it's less about the world being evil and more about you treating your personal details and your life with intent, and being this is not things that need to be shared in order to interact with the game successfully or to interact with other humans successfully. No average human is going to ask you for a screenshot of your tits. Sorry, apologies. I don't know if I know this is the topic, but I know that an average normal human is not going to ask for something like that. And I think the conversation becomes, the moment you feel insecure or you're unsure, just log out, just end the conversation. pull the plug, that's it.
Mhm.
Because
That's
then
right.
you don't have to worry about should I, could I, would I, what happened. It's just done. And then bring it to
So I think
us. Know that
I think
we're
to bring
open.
yeah, yeah. I think to kind of couple what the two of you were saying together, if we go back to even basic sex ed talks, and I know different parents want to handle that in different ways, and so I'm not here to pass judgment on how different people handle it. But for those that handle it in a way where it is an open conversation with your young person, and it's very much about what you share and how you're sharing it, and that includes your body and your energy with another person. And when you make
Mhm.
that decision and that type of stuff, you should treat that same kind of thought and concept with your personal information. It's an extension of yourself. It is
Yes.
a piece that you are choosing to share that can be, when you're willingly giving that up, it can hurt your heart, it can hurt your body, whatever. It depends on, like Omar says, that information can be manipulated and used in different ways. And so I think it is ultimately about, ironically, consent. And whether or
Yes.
not you are consenting to give that information to somebody else. And to your point, Jessica, no is a complete answer, right? It's a complete
Yes.
sentence. And so somebody says, I need your date of birth, I need your social, no, right? I don't
Yeah.
need that for that game. I don't need that type of information. No, you don't need a picture of my breasts or genitalia or anything like that, obviously. And so I think it is a larger conversation about consent, not just on what the other person's consent is, but what is your consent, and having enough self-worth and feeling comfortable in your own skin to say, I don't want to share my body, my information, my photos, whatever, my likeness with you. And really expand that consent conversation, I think, so that it feels less of a yes no situation and much more of owning yourself and being comfortable in yourself and setting healthy boundaries as to what you want to do with someone else or not. And that includes social behavior. So many of us, we grew up in the, oh, my friends jumped off the bridge, I'm going to go jump off the bridge kind of mindset, right? And with this generation, I think we're seeing a bit of a shift with them, but I think it does have to come from the parents as well, especially as we navigate kind of our generational traumas of things that we grew up with, which were very different in a different world. And just saying it's a much larger conversation. And if you can tie it into this is part of your value and part of your worth, which includes your private information and your body and your whatever, then it's a much easier conversation. They understand that. Like, where back in the day when we were younger, they would say, oh, go give your uncle, the creepy uncle, a hug. You've got to give. Nowadays, we're like, no, man, creepy uncle can sit over there. We do not have to force our kids to hug anybody or smile at anybody, or let them understand that is their body and their choice. If they are visibly uncomfortable for a reason, do not force your kid to hug the creepy uncle, right? Like that. No offense to creepy uncles or non-creepy uncles. I'm just saying in general, like there used to be
No
that thing
offense
of,
to creepy uncles,
I mean,
then go
complete
jump off the
offense to
okay,
bridge.
creepy
well, that's
uncle.
true. Okay. Offense to all the creepy uncles.
Creepy
But
uncles.
so no offense to the non-creepy uncles. I did not mean to loop you in with creepy uncles. That's probably a
Sure.
better way of saying it.
Oh,
But
Man.
but truly, there is that shift in that mindset of from people pleasing to it's okay to set healthy boundaries.
Mhm.
And if we give our kids that autonomy and that understanding that these are healthy boundaries, it might be an easier thing for them to understand of, I'm allowed to say no, and that's okay. I'm not going to hurt that other person, you know, Keenan the Warrior, whoever the character is, right? Knowing that they're not going to hurt that character's feelings, right? That kind of thing. And that it doesn't matter. It's still your autonomy to take care of.
diving into privacy and consent too. I think what kids need to understand these days is while you might at this time love your partner, let's get into a conversation that is very tough to have. And you might want to give consent to share photos that are explicit. I am not going to use this as a moment to shame anybody. That is your choice, your body, your relationship. But consent
That's it.
is now permanent because of the internet. And the moment you
Bingo.
share those photos, it is very hard to revoke
Mhm.
that consent because they now have them in their personal ownership. So you have to
Right.
really think long and hard about your inability to now revoke those photos from them. Because relationships change as much as you might think that you are going to be with your high school sweetheart forever. And once you leave, there is no telling, even though litigation can happen, and yes, you could technically sue them if they were to share those photos in an inappropriate way, they're still now out there. So whether or not litigation happens, your photo has the ability to be passed around. And that is something that needs to be defined with your children. Like, once a photo is out there on the internet, it is out there for good. Once you share it to somebody's personal messaging, they have it forever. So like, that should be a part of the conversation as well, is understanding permanency in today's day and age.
And the
I think that's great.
commercialization, I think, like, and obviously, like, when the kids get older, right? I'm not gonna, as much I'm a weirdo, and maybe like I'll sit there and try to spit this to my 2-year-old, like, listen, the platforms are trying to make money off of this anyway, and they're incentivized. And she'll be like, Daddy, like, let's play with the pony. Like, what, like,
Yeah.
stop. But
Right.
but that, like, it's everything on the internet's forever, right? The internet is forever. That's the quaint phrase. But it's these platforms themselves are incentivized to not care
Yes.
about. So like to pull that thread, Jess, those pictures are out there. Sure, we can yell and rightfully so get them pulled down, but the internet's forever, right? And where they're going to end up, whatever porn site they're going to end up on, is going to be like, hey, we try to enforce, but stuff slips through. Meanwhile, you're hearing about tons of rings of like forcible exposure, like, and that happens to even folks obviously on the older side of things. So it's just understanding that whatever is out there, regardless, and it's just one of the realities. It sucks to have to say that. It's very 1984, but if it's out there, it's out there.
You're not burning negatives anymore, right? You can't rip the photo up and burn the negatives and go, okay, it's gone. I mean, kids on this are going, what are negatives?
What are negatives, right? Like,
meanwhile,
what are negatives?
I was
Like,
in a dark room in high school developing my own film. So
same.
That's what, yeah, right. Like,
Right there,
you can't break the physical media and then it's gone. No, these things are out there. It's pretty much forever. I think the example that I'm going to bring up in that case is, remember back in the day with the photo Beyonce wanted taken down, right? And if somebody as powerful as a Beyonce and as culturally impactful can't get a photo taken down, like, that's over. If anything, it's gonna, like you folks, both of you were saying in separate threads, it's gonna incentivize folks to do it more, right?
Yep.
Those images kept getting shared. It's hard, but it's a reality of what we're living in the digital time, I think.
I agree. And
so.
Omar, I think this brings up
I want to, no, please go ahead.
So I think this brings up another important discussion too, that links all of this together, is app permissions. So even if somebody is not maybe directly sharing, when you're downloading a game, a lot of people just click through those app permissions and don't actually take a second to pause and think about what they mean. Why does it need access to my camera, to my photo gallery, to my contacts, to my text messaging platform, to my Instagram account? Like, these are all ways that you become the product, and then you give it permission to use content within your own personal device for their gain.
Yep.
So it is now no longer
That's
yours just by accepting and clicking through what seems to be a harmless app. And I think I brought this story up when we first started talking about this topic, but I am still very big into mobile gaming. I like a lot of horror games. And I was playing through one that was it put you into what would be a text message based app where you were trying to determine the source of this mystery for these murdered, what were they? Orphans. And all of it was pretty harmless. None of it was out of app. But all of a sudden, it told me one of the clues is in Instagram. You need to go connect with this person on Instagram and get a clue from them. Well, I thought it was going to remain in app. So when I clicked on it, I expected to be brought to a fake Instagram account. No, it logged me directly into my Instagram and sent a friend request to an individual that I have never connected with in my past. So it took me from in-game to out of game without me even having a moment to give consent. And these are things that you're starting to see in some of these mobile games, because they are more lax and they're from individual creators and they don't have some of the big controls in place that your like Epic Games or your Nintendo or your whatever have in place. So it becomes a lot more gray in the areas of privacy and security, and what isn't acceptable for those apps to do.
I think that's an excellent reminder, because this is not just for our children, it's for the adults as well. And looking at those terms and conditions, looking at the app approvals is a big thing. And this extends even into dating websites. So actually this goes into where I was going to go. So it's a perfect tie-in. So, a quick story time kind of offshoot, but is very much related to this. A couple of years ago, I had a friend call me who had fun enough, early 20-year-old son who was on a regular dating app, like Plenty of Fish, like a regular dating website. And he had been talking with this young lady who claimed to be, 18, 19 years old. And they started regular conversations and, started engaging regular conversations, or what seemed to be. And she's like, hey, I want to send you a picture. He's like, 20-year-old boy, like, okay, he didn't ask for it. She then just sends this picture. Next thing he knows, because they had shared information and they were going to meet, but they hadn't met yet and blah, blah, blah. His phone rings from her, quote, father, claiming she is 16, not 18 or 19. And now he is in possession of child pornography. And the father is now trying to blackmail this young man. And we're going to send the police to your house. So my friend had called, like, what do we do? What's going on? Because what happens is allegedly the, quote, police then call the house. This has been reported, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I'm telling you, this feels very, very scammy. Give me a minute, right? So I, of course, called the police station, the local police station this guy claimed to be from, and we figured it all out and was like, yeah, no. But there was a good 24 to 48 hours before they had called me where this guy was like threatening money and sending fake people to their door, pretending to be police officers in the area. I mean, it was bad. The extent of what people do with the information you voluntarily give them, through permissions or otherwise, that spiraled beyond quickly, right?
Yep.
But luckily we were able to make the report to the real police,
Mhm.
but they couldn't identify the father, right? They never saw him and any of that kind of
Mhm.
stuff. So, but they had made it clear. They're like, oh no, this is a scam that's going all around this particular city pretty wildly. So they would target you by your location, right? Find a young man who wanted to talk to this young lady. We don't even know that it was really a young lady, right? To your point earlier, Jessica, you have no idea. It could have just been this guy sending random photos he made on AI,
Exactly.
Mhm. 100%.
Yep.
building up trust and putting it out there. So, this isn't just for our little kids. This is for our young adults and even older adults as we go on in our lives and make choices and decisions as to which apps we want to engage with and how and what information we're sharing openly. Back in the day, it was, oh yeah, dating website. I'm in this area. Now, what does that get you? Potentially somebody at your door claiming to be a police officer
Mhm.
because you're in possession of child porn, but you're like, whoa, that was somebody who told me they were of age and they signed up with the same terms and conditions I did, right? And to
Mhm.
Omar's point, nobody's really monitoring. Oh, well, we did the best we could to ensure. Nobody ensures that people on these platforms are the right age. It's just like any website.
Oh
I
no, I
click
mean
them over
it's a
18.
checkbox. Are you
Click.
18 or older? Check.
It's a check mark.
Good to go.
That's right.
Who's gonna
I mean,
Who's gonna
it's
say
That's
no?
right.
Even as a young kid, I was always like, "What? I'm not gonna
yeah,
say
of
no."
course
Like,
I'm 18.
like,
Mhm.
come on. Yeah.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
And
not like
Alyson,
buying alcohol in a store.
I think your story brings up a good point, and I think it's part of the reason that we're having these conversations. And I'm going to quote somebody from a book I recently read. So there's a gentleman named Eric Olson, and he wrote a book called The Toilet Paper Principle. It's an incident response book. But one of the things he says is people don't rise to the occasion in moments of panic. They drop to their level of training. And I think this is why, at the heart of it, is why we're having these conversations, is because our kids need to know under duress when they're put in these situations, how do they respond properly? Because in panic, we act irrationally and we do
Yes.
things that will probably make a situation worse instead of better. But if our parents have talked to us, if we understand the implications, if we're setting up the right controls and groundwork, then they're at a much better place for knowing what to do.
I think that's exactly it. And helping them make that guidance, give them that guidance and those guidelines on how to operate. Because when I go and speak to local high schools and we talk about social media use and stuff, and I'm like, look, if anything triggers an emotional response in you, any emotional response, the first thing you need to do is slow the heck down. I'll keep it PG, but slow the heck. I always think of Come From Away, the play where it's like STFD, slow the down. Yeah, that's how I think
Yeah.
about it. But slow the heck down. And so, it's if you are triggered, I hate to use that phrase, but that's what they say, right? If you're triggered, sit down and figure out why. What is it they're trying to emote from you? and then get yourself to that place of calm and then really go through and start dissecting what it is and what's going on and try to validate whether or not it's true. When we get into that sense of panic of this is what it told me and I'm going to respond this way, right? Like you said, you start making poor choices because that's what it's designed to elicit. It's an emotional response. They want you to go to that base level of instinct of might have to chew my own foot off to get out of this when you're going, no, it's really just baloney. There's nothing here. This is just, garbage. But we're not in that state of mind. And so it's really helping them stop, question why is it eliciting that kind of response, and then really kind of reality test and go to a safe place to do it. Go to your parent, go to a friend, right? Whatever it is that you need to reality test and go, wait a minute, here's this, just like my friend did. He called me and goes, wait a minute, here's the steps. Here's what happened. It's like, yeah, that's fraud.
Yep.
And they're like,
And
really?
you do
I'm like,
start to
yeah,
wonder.
I'll call the cops for you and check it out. But,
It's definitely fair. We start to wonder how many kids or even teens' lives could have been saved, because suicide is becoming a big part of this conversation where kids feel like they cannot turn to the adults within their lives to have these talks, and instead they're taking their own lives. If these conversations had been had earlier on, where a child felt more comfortable coming to their parents about this kind of stuff, could we have prevented this? And I think that's what we're trying to do, is let's make this an easy conversation to have. It shouldn't be that hard to talk about. Yes, in America, unfortunately, we have created this silver screen of sexualization as not supposed to be talked about between parents and their children. But it shouldn't be that way, because we do live in a world where it has become very sexualized, and there is a lot of dangers out there that are related to that world. So let's make it a more feasible conversation between parties.
And I think and that's a great point. The angle that I think I'm gonna be like hewing to, right, as my baby gets older, is similar to what I do on the job. What I mean by that is both of you have touched on in different angles. So it's a social engineering exercise, and it's defense against social engineering. And one of the things that I find that's most effective with professionals that get tricked for this. I'd like probably back up a second. Phishing and social engineering is still probably one of the primary things you fight against, right? In the digital age, period. End of story. You have all these blinky boxes, you have all this amazing stuff, and you want to nerd out with AI, I'm right there with you. But at the same time, the most effective is that thing that gets you emotional, that elicits that response. Either they hit you via text, they hit you via a phone call or email. So I think starting with the empathy of this affects adults too. This affects everyone. Like everyone gets got. There was one for me where I was like, wow, I was almost tipping my cap. Like I got a text message and it was like, from Verizon, supposedly my Verizon points were going to expire. And I was like, wait a second. No, they're going to expire today. And then I was like, son, what are you doing? You're in this game. Like this is obviously and it short circuits that rational mind. And sadly, at this age cohort that we're discussing, you're right, Jess, it does lead to suicide. It does lead to deaths of despair. And you have, such promising lives snuffed out simply because, they're not there to, they don't feel like they can talk to people. Obviously, they're still not able to, handle, if adults can't handle this, what do we expect? Like that racing, oh my God, I have to figure this out. So yeah, constantly, I think having this conversation with kids is, at the age appropriate level, but just being open and saying this happens, talk about it. It's not going to be shameful. We want to sit here, protect it. I think that's probably the biggest move, right? Because nefarious actors are going to exploit the fact that you don't have those, and that's where things get hinky.
That's exactly it. They want you to feel shameful.
Mm-hmm.
And to your point much earlier where you said, they're using AI to create stuff, one of the recent cases, I think it was like 11 or 12-year-old that did succumb to suicide was, one that they said that they had photos and then showed this kid photos where this kid had never sent photos to anybody. And it was totally made up stuff. It was like, oh, I'm going to send this out everywhere and ruin you. So it doesn't even matter if the threat is real or based on real information. It's that shame. And I think to Jessica's point where we have become a culture where other countries aren't like this,
No.
but in the United States where talking about sex is shameful and all of this, and where instead of talking about it as autonomy and body positivity and shared experiences and why or when you may not be appropriate, depending on where you are in your life cycle and age. I mean, some people want to wait till much, much later now, right? Like that type of thing. So it just depends on having that open and honest conversation and not making it shameful. Our young people are going to make better choices for themselves, both online and physically in person, and healthier choices. Because when you do it from a point of shame, that's when there's usually something to clean up later on. That's when there's trauma. That's what, right? That's when the ultimate end result. I'm very sensitive to that topic. I have a friend who, not because of this situation, but who was only 21 when he passed. And so, as a parent, I can't even imagine. I'd rather have the tough conversation than having not had it and have to bury my kid.
Yeah.
Agree. 100%.
That. Yeah. A little discomfort
and this doesn't
now
even have to be
for them to have a
sexual.
healthy life. Correct. That's right.
Bullying is huge.
We're not
right now with
talking
mine.
insert A, tab B.
Yeah.
Bullying
too.
is.
Yeah.
Yep.
And having the open door conversation, right, Jess? Of
Yes.
like, at least talk to me, and
Yeah.
we'll figure this out together. It's and
That's
not not, it's not something to be ashamed of or no, that yeah, absolutely. Oh God,
See, heavy. It is a tough conversation. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very tough topic,
I'll
especially
say
as
for
parents.
anybody who's listening, for sure. Could you imagine the teachers, right? I mean, is there, sometimes that's the safe place to be. And yet we put things on teachers where there's lots of limitations in there, some that are reasonable, some that are not necessarily reasonable. And I think at the end, if we all operate from what is in the best interest and health and safety of our children, I think you can get past partisan nonsense to really get into what really do our kids need to be safe in this world.
Agree.
And to be able to be productive, hopeful, adults as they move forward. So I'll say for anybody listening to this conversation, we would love to know, in the comments, ways that you've addressed this issue with your kids, things that you have found helpful. I think continuing the conversation would be super helpful. Shared experiences on what worked, what hasn't, it's an ongoing conversation that needs to keep happening. It's an uncomfortable conversation, but it doesn't have to be. What I found with our kid in particular, and my friends have found with their children, is if you're not weird about it, they're not going to be weird about it. So it happens with food stuff. Like, I'll give you an analogy, quite literally. We did have a friend when my son was younger, one of his best friends. She would come over and hang out. Mom's like, I got to go run errands. We watch her for a little bit. Yeah, no problem. She'd go take care of it. We had dinner and it was broccoli and whatever, but broccoli was part of it. And kid had no problem. She's like, oh, this is good. Ate the broccoli. Friend picks her up and says, what'd she have for dinner? Oh, she had da-da-da-da and broccoli. She goes, she doesn't eat broccoli. Well, she did tonight. Is she allergic to it? She goes, no, I don't like broccoli. She doesn't like broccoli. I said, well, there you go. So she literally ate every ounce of broccoli and asked for a second helping of it. So, it's, if you think it's ick or yuck or weird and you come with it, the conversation with that vibe of shame and that type of stuff and repression, that's what your kid is going to pick up on it because you're the leader in their life. And if you address it, this is what we've done with our son, is it's just a very matter of fact conversation. We're humans. We have bodies reproduce to make other bodies. It doesn't have to be, like you said, sexual. It's literal biology, right?
Yes.
But along with that comes physicality and emotions and trust and all of these other things that people don't talk about. And so we do address it from that. What are you sharing in that moment, right? It's not I'm not going to tell my now 20-year-old, oh, it doesn't feel good with the right person nonsense. Like, no, I'm not going to, oh, it's only for that purpose. Look, like I said, if you've got religious beliefs, you do you. And I'm not saying I don't have religion. I'm just saying I want my kid to make the best decisions for himself and for his partner and to respect that consent and where they are in their respective journey, right?
And from a place of knowledge.
But also the reality of the world and a place of knowledge, and always operate from a place of knowledge. That's right. And still feel comfortable enough to say, hey, Mom, this is where we at, can we have that conversation? Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, he has never hesitated to say something weird happened or, online or whatever. And I'm very thankful that he has been open with us in that regard. and has been cautious about it. But you know, I don't monitor all his accounts, but I can tell you when we did first set up with social media and we gave him his first iPhone because I was divorced and he was in 2 separate homes and his father had medical issues. And so we didn't want to give him an iPhone, but it was one of those like, okay, you may need to text me if dad's having a medical emergency and I need to come over and help out, which did indeed happen. But it was, we told him straight up, we are monitoring your, I forgot which parental control we had on it, but we had it on there. And so we could see how he was interacting and to make sure it was appropriate. And there was one time, there was something he said, even in a private chat, where we were like, oh, you know, normally we let him make his mistakes. But if there was something that clearly crossed a line and we went, no, family meeting with all of us, we brought his dad in, his stepdad in, and we had a conversation of, you are not, I don't care if you thought it was kidding. Me reading it on the outside is not kidding. And it was always very open. It wasn't, oh, we're spying on you. It was, look, you are only, you know, entry level middle school. So what, 11, right? Somewhere in there, 10, 11.
Yep.
So, you know, this is a big responsibility. We want to help you navigate this. This is on lockdown, just so you know, like, this is not a surprise. At 10, you do not get privacy, right? That's, and again, like, it wasn't a helicopter parent thing. It was just it would send an alert if, oh, this looks like they're trying to log into this website. This looks like they're having a conversation with an adult they shouldn't have. And I don't know if it was Watchdog or I honestly don't remember which one it was, but we did put that in place. And so it did allow us to have that extra conversation with him. And again, not in a way to shame him or embarrass him, but it was a no, teachable moment. Like, you're not to do that to other people and they're not to do that to you. And let's talk about why and have that conversation. So there are tools out there for parents that, with cell phones and that type of stuff and monitoring of social media websites, you can use. And we shouldn't look at our 10-year-olds as fully formed adults. They're not. And again, I am not a helicopter parent. I am not all up in my kids' business. It is meant to be open conversation. It was not about spying, but it was to help monitor things I can't see, because I'm not going to log in as their account in all the places and check all the things that they're doing. And so it's surface level, but at least it was something to be able to have that intelligent conversation with him and help him navigate that situations. You know, there are tools out there that can help parents in that. I don't know if you guys have looked at any of those and seen things. I mean, Omar, yours is still a little young, but Jessica, as yours are starting to get a little bit older, have you seen any of those that have been helpful or not so helpful?
I used Watchdog for a little bit. Now I have, at least on my 3-year-old's tablet, I have basically like, he cannot purchase, download, or access anything without me first. It sends an alert to my phone to give him permission, and then I can say no or yes. So that's one that I use quite a bit. But with my 6-year-old, I think this is where I prefer to be in the room with him so that I can hear, at least if he's watching things, what is being said or discussed. Because I think it's also important, like you had said, age appropriateness and what a child actually understands is or is not appropriate, because a 6-year-old may not understand that what is coming towards him is not appropriate. It goes right over their heads and they become so inundated with it, especially if they're doing things like flipping through YouTube, where this just becomes standard language to them, that they're going to hear it and see it on there constantly. Right. And then when they get it from an actual person in a chat, they're going to be like, oh, this is normal, but it's not. So I think it's also important to make sure that you're having those, like, if you're catching them listening to it and being like, hey, buddy, what they just said is not appropriate in a normal everyday conversation. Let's talk about why. And then we're going to make sure if we hear these types of things again, that we tell mom and switch it to something else. Like, being able to give them the knowledge to know that this isn't appropriate is also very important.
Yeah, we are definitely shifting into much more hands-on parenting, where our generation was probably much more hands-off parenting of, they're outside running around, and if they come back, great. And hopefully they don't die out there, don't get hit by a car. And it's just not that world anymore where you can do that. We do have to help them parse the language, parse the knowledge and the information that is coming at them literally at the speed of a fire hose. From all directions, and you know, which water should you be drinking and which water should you not as you go through it, or you're going to poison yourself in your mind as you go through it. So I think that's a great way to phrase that. I was gonna say, as we get ready to kind of wrap up this particular episode, is there anything else that, you know, either of you would want to share that maybe we didn't touch upon on this topic that needs to be addressed at this point?
I think just one quick side shoot, because it's something that you had mentioned earlier when it comes to applications, particularly in roles or phones or devices when it comes to divorce and family and different things, is the role in devices when it comes to domestic violence and the use of a child within those roles and helping a child kind of decipher when their parent is using the app inappropriately within context of what they're doing. So I know I have associates or people that I have talked with in the past because I have gone through my own essay type of situations, sexual assault for those that don't know the condensed language. But abusers will often use gaming type apps as a way to continue to stalk, track, or abuse the partner in question. So understanding that it's not just about who your child is interacting with in their games, but who their parents might be forcing them to interact with in order to stay in control of the situation. And being able to help people within those types of situations identify those types of apps or language and properly report it is something to consider as well. So making sure kids are aware of how their parent might be using those.
I think that's a great ad. That's a great ad. Omar, anything from you on the end?
I
Additional
just,
thoughts?
I think what we've touched on a lot is just the pervasiveness of all of this. And I think the genie's out of the bottle. It's going in just one direction. I don't foresee that suddenly there's going to be magical legislation or, what's the phrase, reject humanity, return to monkey, right? Like I don't think we're just going to then and neither would I. Tech is great in many instances, but I think just having the curiosity, like the one anecdote I'll share is we got the baby Tony box, right, over Christmas, and my ear perked up just only when I was like, oh, it's got to go on Wi-Fi. Like, for why? And not nefarious. I'm not saying,
Yeah.
burn your Tony boxes. Kid loves it. It's great, right? It's fun to play with. You can do games and whatnot. But just that was almost like the meme, right? Where like Lawrence Fishburne is like swinging his hair. Like it was just like hold on, Wi-Fi? Why? Okay, have it on Front Street. Understand it as parents, right? It's not,
Yes.
the baby's not saying, Wi-Fi with it, but and I think getting into that practice is probably one of the foundational things that you can do to at least, hey, let's start those conversations. Let's understand what these things are doing. As you said, Jess, talk about it in the context of, you made a point earlier that I wanted to touch on really quickly was, hey, these apps might need XYZ, but do they need it for you to be successful in the game? Do they need it to do the thing that it needs to do? Because if you're just draconian with the iron fist, all you're going to get, whether they're 2 or 55, I'll say, with some of the people that I interact with on my 9 to 5, if you just say no, they're going to go, okay, bet. I'm going to work around it. Have that openness and understand what's being used and why. And if you don't, then that's probably a thread to pull on. It's probably something to go, wait a second, why do you need XYZ? Or why does it? We answered the Tony question. The realm satisfaction, great. But then don't stop asking those questions as you go forward.
I think that's a great place to end it on. Be curious, less judgmental as you go through this and ask the questions and educate at the level that meet your kids where they're at. Age is not the only indicator of what your kid can or cannot handle as far as discussions. Mm-hmm. You know your children hopefully well enough to be able to say this is the level of where they're at and meet them at that level in the language that they understand. Use analogies if you need to. I think, as you pointed out at the very beginning, Jessica, about, well, we don't talk to strangers in the store. We don't just walk up to strange people.
That's brilliant. Yeah.
And just same thing online.
Mhm.
It's just people you don't know yet. I know that sometimes strangers are a friend you haven't met yet, but I think in the world we live on, it's everything has to be verified.
Yes.
All the way down. It's just in anything that we do. And this is definitely a challenge. And I think it's going to be an ongoing conversation, especially as more AI ramps up. And as you said, Omar, genie is out of the bottle. This thing is already doing things that I
Not
don't think
getting
people
stuff
ever.
back in, that's for sure.
No, there's Pandora's
No.
box is busted open. There's no way you're going to undo the things that like a nano banana can do. Right?
No,
Just
I mean, if
flat
David
out.
Bowie wants to walk around the weird staircases all day long, I'm fine with that if we're opening Pandora's box. But
It's very true. But I think it's an ongoing convo. To that point, Jessica, we'd love to have you back
I would love to. Thank you for having me.
periodically, right? It was phenomenal. Thank you for listening. Thanks for hopping on. And as always, keep it cyber metal. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.